Hi, everyone. I'm Denny Daniel. I curate the Museum of Interesting Things. The Museum of Interesting Things is normally a traveling museum that goes all over the country and now world and shows people their iPhones. Didn't pop out of thin air. They came from a long line of inventions. In fact, pretty much everything you're going to see today, you could probably do with your iPhone. But if you were alive 100 years ago, you'd have to have everything that I'm going to have here in this room in your pocket to do what your iPhone does. And I kind of call it the missing link factor, all the links in the chain until you get to your iPhone. And we also, in fact, let me just mute everyone so that you guys don't hear all sorts of interesting background noise. Hang on, mute all. Excellent. And hi, Janet, you've got an earth-shattering background there. Like I said, we kind of show the missing link factor, all the links in the chain until you get to this. And once a week, the museum does a speakeasy, a secret speakeasy in Soho, Manhattan, but we also do it virtually so you can see it all over the world. And we're doing one actually tomorrow. The theme is different every single week. So I'll email you guys and let you know what the theme is. Tomorrow's theme is silly inventions. So I picked up amazing films, some of them from the early 1900s, that are all these bizarre contraptions that people invented and put on 16mm film because they're crazy like that. It's amazing how nutty people were in the early 1900s. You would never guess they were this creative and nutty, but they were actually sometimes more creative than we are today. They really went crazy with this medium of film. I've got the chat open and I can see the chat. So if you want to be invited to tomorrow's show, then put your email in the chat, and later on I'll copy and paste it and send you the invite for the secret speakeasy we're doing tomorrow on silly inventions. But the first film I'm going to show here, oh, actually, before I show the first film, I want to show you something that is the star of our show. If you were alive 100 years ago and you were watching these films, in order to watch these films, there was no sound, obviously. So you would have to have, I can't believe I'm using this book as my table, but I have no choice. I'm using Houdini's book. The irony here is unmistakable that I'm using Harry Houdini's book. It's a first edition copy of his book, but I needed something really tall. What am I going to do? That's what I have handy in this room. That tells you exactly what's in my room if I have to use Harry Houdini's book, which I'm going to show you later on. So you will get to see that book. Okay, so if you were alive 100 years ago, you'd have to have one of these as your soundtrack to your movie, a Thomas Edison cylinder record player. So this is an original wax record player. These were invented in 1877. And, oh, speaker view. I thought we should be, am I on speaker? This is a normal room. So I don't even know how to do speaker view. I know that I have me as spotlighted. Yes.
Danny, you're good.
You're fine, Danny. I'm trying to tell everybody else.
Oh, okay.
That they need to change to speaker view because I was on gallery view and you were a tiny little corner. So I'm trying to be helpful.
I do the same. I keep it on gallery view. I like, you should have it on speaker view. I put it on gallery view because it gives me the illusion of playing Madison Square Garden. So I like people. So I see the people. I'm a New Yorker. I want to see the people. I don't want to see icons. So this was invented in 1877. This actually is from the late 1800s. It's an original wax cylinder player. Melissa, you've never seen this one. I don't bring this one out very often because it's a very, very delicate portable one. It normally fits in a handbag, but it's so portable. When I used to take it around, I actually showed the guys from Mythbusters it, and it broke that day. So I said, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't keep it in a handbag anymore. It's 120 years old. So here is a wax cylinder. The song is Ada Jones. Let me read it correctly off my thing. This song is I'm the Only Star That Twinkles on Broadway. Clearly, I would play a song like that. Did you hear my cat do the last note? That was cute. It was almost perfect timing. So that is Ada Jones. She was kind of the Lady Gaga of the time, very, very famous from the early 1900s until the 19 teens, and maybe even later than that. Let me move that out of the way. So that would have been your soundtrack to these silent films. All these films are silent. I'm going to play a very, very classic record here. I know, Paul, you want me to play that radio station, but if I do that, then Melissa will get annoyed because all that stuff will be protected music. And YouTube will make sure when we put this on later to take it all down. So I'm using original vinyl records, a Calliope record from many, many years ago, that hopefully they have no clue what this is on YouTube and will not drive me crazy about it. Let's hope. And it's really fun music. So the first film I'm gonna play is Conquest of the Poles by Georges Méliès. And let me get my little notes over here so that you can get most of his work. And this is really cool to know. Most of his work is based on literature from Jules Verne especially. And his characters are often named after famous artists and writers and stuff like that. So he even, one of the characters in this one is Buffalo Bill, believe it or not. And Georges Méliès almost always does a cameo in his films. A, because he was a great, actor, and B, it's a lot cheaper to pay yourself. So he was often in his films. This one, Conquest of the Poles, is inspired by Robert Perry's 1909 Exposition. The film is from around 1912. It's one of his later films. And it's also based on Jules Verne's Voyages Extraordinaires, his book. Let's see what else. A lot of his films often have puppets. So this giant snow thing you're going to see is basically a marionette that he has. And often you'll notice that his films are shot kind of like you're in a theater. That's because he owned a theater. and that was the way, he would tell his stories in a theater way. So basically the camera's rather stationary, and then the movie, shows on the screen as if you're sitting in the audience to one of his plays. All right, so let's check out Trip to the Moon. So let me turn off the lights so you see better. I'm sorry, Conquest of the Poles, Trip to the Moon. Hang on, let me get the music playing already. So that way we're ready with music. Isn't that amazing? Hang on, let me take off the stereo for a second. Isn't that amazing? I love that film. It's one of my favorite films from Georges Méliès. It got great reviews, but by the time this came out in 1912, there's so much competition in the world for film that that style is no longer in vogue. But his films were very, very magical. They were considered this kind of fantasy type cinema at the time. Why were they so magical? Because he actually was a magician. Georges Méliès started as a magician. And in fact, as a little kid, he was very interested in puppets and marionettes and worked on them as well. So let me show you one of the musical pieces that was written for this piece. The guy who did a lot of his music was Ezra Reed. And this is an original Ezra Reed sheet. So he did a lot of the music, and this is the one for the North Pole. And if you guys know the Dreyfus Affair, believe it or not, he was very interested in the Dreyfus Affair, Georges Méliès, and he did a piece on the Dreyfus Affair as well. So this is the original sheet, lyric sheet and music sheet for the Dreyfus Affair by Ezra Reed. And all of these are around at least 100 years old. So if you know how to play piano, go for it. Real quick. I hope you sight read very fast. So yeah, once I found out Ezra Reed did a lot of his music, and they would play this stuff sometimes live, his movies were often showed in his theater. Believe it or not, he would actually show these movies as part of, it was almost like a vaudeville act. He would have some performances, and then he would have some movies, kind of like what we do at the Speakeasy. Ironically, I never planned it that way, but funny enough, our Speakeasies, the next one, we're going to do another Georges Méliès one, and we're going to have a Coney Island contortionist performing at our Speakeasy live, and you're going to get to see that. So that kind of vaudevilling thing starts off very early on in theater history. Let me pull out some more of the hubbub. Oh, the other, you notice there were other people flying to the poles to in the conquest of the poles. One of those were the suffragettes. So suffragettes decided to make their own flying ship and get to the poles, and that one unfortunately failed, and all the other ones failed. But you know, he added them to their film as well. So the next one, of course, is the most important one of all for today. The next one is going to be Trip to the Moon. I like to play it nice and early on so you guys get to enjoy Trip to the Moon. And then we're going to show some really, really great obscure Méliès that you don't get to see very often, like the Magic Lantern and the Turkish Executioner and stuff like that. I've got a ton of his films. But Trip to the Moon is also based on the Jules Verne book, From the Earth to Moon, and also on H.G. Wells, The First Men on the Moon. And oh, one little aside about the Méliès thing, that marionette you saw, it took about 2 people to run the giant snowman. And he was, I think his head alone was 6 feet tall. He was a huge marionette. And you know, and all of his pieces have a like I said, a ton of people running all the items, running around and running all the items. I'll try to mention a few things during the film as well, so that you not miss out on anything while you're watching it. Oh, and at the end, you notice that when they get to the pole, that pin was the magnetic pole, the needle, and you notice because it's magnetic, they all got stuck to the magnetic pole. Which was kind of Georges Méliès kind of fun. He always tried to add some sort of humor to all his stuff. So once again, this one is Trip to the Moon. At this point, Georges Méliès is becoming famous in America. And the Americans are actually bootlegging his films. So Edison and everybody were making copies of his films and selling them and not giving him money for them. So he was actually losing a great deal of money because of this, and he ended up opening an office here in New York. He opened an office where I'm standing, and he sent his brother to run the business. And believe it or not, he actually set up some of his manufacturing in Fort Lee, New Jersey. So why does Fort Lee have such a great film community? Because Fort Lee is the beginning of film. So his brother came here to kind of capture some of the money they were losing on bootlegs. Here's the irony. The reason why you can watch these films is because the bootlegs are what survived. Most of his films got destroyed. And in fact, Georges Méliès himself, when he was so unhappy about what was going on, is losing money and, you know, and all these, you know, companies ripping him off and stuff, that he burned his own films. He destroyed his own films. So the films that survived, ironically, were the bootlegs. And thank God these guys ironically bootlegged them so that we could watch them today. How cool, how bizarro is that? And I want to show you a picture of Georges Méliès, because then you'll really see what kind of amazing magician this guy was. There he is, Georges Méliès. And here's another old postcard of him with a stamp. Like I said, he started as a magician and then he went on to do film. So this one, like I said, is a trip to the moon. Enjoy your trip to the moon for the WatchCity Steampunk Festival. Let's get the music back on. I should just dance to this all day, right? So, like I said, that was Trip to the Moon. Melissa mentioned in the chat, and you could definitely put some things in the chat because I've got a second machine here and I'm reading the chat and putting some more information in there. And like I said, if you want to come to our speakeasy, if I tell you when and where, I have to kill you. So email me and I'll email you and then I'll kill you. Because clearly if it's a secret speakeasy, I can't tell you. So Melissa mentioned some of the effects. This is so cool. The man, believe it or not, he wanted to buy the camera from the Lumiere brothers, the people who invented the projector and the camera. Put your email in the chat. That's where you want to put it, and then I'll email you the secret speakeasy because I'll read the chat afterwards. So the Lumiere brothers in France in the 1890s did the first showing in Paris of a movie ever in the history of mankind. Georges Méliès was invited to that. I just can't even believe the guy was in the room. So this guy is actually in the room and offered them 10,000 francs for their camera. And they said, no. And he goes, I'll give you more. And they said, no, 20,000, whatever he offered. The Lumieres did not want to sell him the camera. So what does he do? He buys a projector and he jerry rigs a projector into a camera. And he made the thing was so noisy and crazy. I think he called it the automatic shotgun or something. Like it was nuts. It was, I think he called it a coffee grinder. It was so noisy, but it was able to film, and no one cared about the noise because he was doing silent film anyway. So the man jerry rigs his own thing, makes his own camera, and all the effects you're seeing are in camera. So when you see things pop in and pop out, this is what he's doing. He films you, then he takes you out of the scene and replaces you with maybe a monster. Then he rewinds the film and re-exposes the film. So that's his double exposure. He's actually not doing it in post on a computer. He's doing it in camera by rewinding the film and filming on the film multiple times. And that's how he's doing double exposure. And he has to get it just right in order to film it, you know, and the actors have to be in the same location if there are other actors in that scene. So they have to stand still. It's amazing the stuff he did. And then when you see things become bigger and smaller, how's he do that? He takes the camera and moves it closer and then takes the camera and moves it further away. And that's a lot of the times how he makes things bigger and smaller. We're talking like real early special effects and animation. And a lot of his special effects are based on theater special effects as well. So those trap doors that they have in Broadway theaters, he has in his theater. So he's using all the effects that theater companies would use on his films as well. And that's how all those special effects happen. Sometimes he even takes something and covers it with black cloth. And that's how, you know, things will disappear and reappear on the screen. We'll see that with the Turkish executioner, where he chops people's heads off. And the people's heads, obviously, this isn't Rome and the Colosseum, where you actually killed people. What they did was they covered them with black cloth. And that's how, you know, heads disappear and reappear and things appear and reappear. So the next film, like I said, is one of the most important films you'll probably see. It is the Thomas Edison color test film that I'm debuting today. As you can hear, my cat is coming down to witness this because it's such a momentous moment for my cat as well. And let me pull out that sheet that I had that mentioned who is in it. Okay, so it's an 1898 film. It's the Serpentine Dance. We've got Annabelle Moore, who is known as Peerless Annabelle. She was a Gibson girl, and she was also part of the Ziegfeld Follies. She was one of the Ziegfeld Follies dancers. So she was known for this. She would get tangled up in this fabric, and they would have, sometimes it was so crazy. And they had different colored lights during this performance, but being that you're using black and white film, he had to hand color every single frame to make this happen. Now, many people have recreated her dance over the years, and even while she was alive, but she was famous for it. So once again, this is the Edison color test film. Enjoy. Oh, let me put on the music because it's so short that by the time I run back, it'll be over. Isn't that amazing? I actually was not even rewinding the film before because I just wanted to watch it, because it's just amazing to think that they actually had color film over 120 years ago. It's just unbelievable to even watch. So the next film I'm going to show you guys is actually 3 films in one. Let me pull the reel out so that I can make sure I get it right for you. In the correct order. So we're going to be watching 3 films, mostly from 1903 and 1904. The first one is The Monster. The second one is The Terrible Turkish Executioner. And the third one is one of my favorite, The Magic Lantern. So let me pull out some of the notes here so that I can give you a little bit of information. But remember, with The Terrible Executioner and all these films, you'll see Georges Méliès. He's actually in the films. He always does some sort of cameo. So he's the executioner. In Trip to the Moon, he's the scientist trying to convince the science community that we can go to the moon. He's always in the movies, and he's usually one of the stars in almost every one of the films. And as far as a magic lantern, there's one right there from the 1800s. So that is an original magic lantern from the 1800s. This is an Ernst Planck one. He was a very, very famous magic lantern maker. And here's another Ernst Planck. This was a little bit later, a children's model from the early 1900s. And there is the original oil lamp, because clearly children should be playing with oil lamps. In the 1800s, what doesn't kill them teaches them not to do that again. And here is an original Ernst Planck lantern slide. That is a magic lantern slide. These were hand painted. And we do a magic lantern show every year. I plan on doing one very soon, probably spring, summertime. We're going to do a magic lantern show for you guys. So if you gave me your email, I'll email you and let you know when it is, because we're going to be doing a Walt Disney magic lantern show with glass slides. So these are the original Disney slides, and I have everything from Donald Duck to Pinocchio. And I'm going to be reading the original story. So magic lanterns were around for hundreds of years, and Georges Méliès was very inspired by this, because this was the method of storytelling. It was basically the PowerPoint before PowerPoint. And even Thomas Edison sold magic lanterns, magic lantern presentations. This is an actual catalog of magic lantern presentations. So PowerPoint did not invent this. Look how many existed 100 years ago. Every line here is a magic lantern presentation. This came with 2 things: a package of glass slides, your PowerPoint slides, and a booklet like this one that you read from, your presentation. So when someone like Jessica Lucci would read from her books, she would have a magic lantern presentation. She would have lantern slides as she would read her stories. And you should pick up her novels, by the way. She's also in the festival, and she's in the room. She's smiling. So that was really the inspiration for theater. Originally, it was magic lantern shows. So the last film you're going to see is a magic lantern. And like I said, he often does substitution, where he stops the camera, pulls something out, brings something back. And that's how things come in and out of this magic lantern. That's the magic behind it. And remember, he was a magician, so he was good at that kind of stuff. Then we're going to talk a little more about the magic side of this all. This is the guy who did the film. God, I'm so loving that Calliope music. I'm going to play that from now on every time when I do silent film shows. And hopefully YouTube won't have a problem with it. That's really cool information, Rachel, that you were a librarian and you had these on CDs. That's cool. You had a good library. And hi, everyone there. Hi, Michal from Israel. That's cool. We have one person from Israel. now we have the whole world here. And hopefully my friends from Dead Can Dance are here because I invited them, but I don't know if they're here because I can't see. And hi, Richard. Hi, Melissa again. Hey, Rebecca. So like I said, that piece, they did a lot of great special effects where basically he would cover people and then, you know, stop the camera and then uncover things. It was, you know, kind of rudimentary special effects, but it was actually very well done, considering the time. So the next film I'm going to show is a filmmaker that learned from Georges Méliès. Let me get his name right because it's so difficult to read these names sometimes. Segundo de Chomón. He's a Spanish filmmaker from also the same period as Méliès. And the film we're going to show is The Red Spectre from 1907. El Espectro Rojo, The Red Spectre. So this guy is very interesting as well, his story. He learned from Georges Méliès. Many people were kind of learning from him and expanding on it. And he also was very into hand coloring as well. That was actually a job the guy did. And he and his wife would do these stencils where they would hand cover film using stencils. It was a whole different process that was much more efficient. And let's see what else. Yeah, his wife worked on that up until around 1912. They did that. And you'll see that there's this demon who's a magician, and he tries to do his act, and the skeleton burns and resurrects. He resurrects these ladies, and then there's one who kind of gets him and frees all the ladies. So this time the suffragists actually win in a way. Now a little bit of extra information about Georges Méliès, and we're almost at the end of the show, but we'll go a little over so that we can show this protege. And since we started a little late, and I'm sure you guys would enjoy watching this one, The Red Spectre. But a few little bits about Georges Méliès. Like I said, he was a magician and he owned a theater. Do you know the theater's name? Yes, you do, because if you're a fan of Houdini, Houdini named himself after this theater. It was the Houdin Theater. And Harry Houdini actually named himself after Georges Méliès' theater. So I brought a book to show you. This is a first edition copy of Harry Houdini's book, A Magician Among the Spirits. And this book is a reaction to another book, which Jessica will appreciate because this is a writer that all of you know, including Jessica. This is a first edition copy of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Case for Spirit Photography. So a lot of these double exposure things people thought were spirits. And look, you got to admit, I mean, is that not a spirit behind those two people? They really thought this double exposure photography was spirits, and Conan Doyle believed in this and wrote 5 books on the subject. I have all 5 books, first edition copy. And he actually argued with Harry Houdini about this, so much so that I heard they unfriended each other on Facebook. Okay, maybe they didn't unfriend each other on Facebook, but I actually have definitive proof that they did not unfriend each other on Facebook. Melissa, you'll be impressed. I have definitive proof. Here is Harry Houdini's book, and look who he's got on the title page, first edition copy. There's a picture of Harry Houdini with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So although they argued about spirit photography, Harry Houdini said, you know, I disagree with him, but I still respect his opinion. And he put him on the title page of his book. How cool is that? Even though he wrote his book, obviously, as a response to the other book. So to Conan Doyle's book, almost as like teasing him, saying a magician among the spirits. So once again, in case you forgot, I just think it's really cool that Harry Houdini named himself after the Méliès Theater, the Houdin Theater, which is named after a magician in the first place. Méliès got it from a magician. So it's kind of got this whole magician theme going on in the whole thing. So once again, this film is one of the people who was influenced by Georges Méliès, Segundo de Simeon, The Red Spectre. So he's double exposing this. Often they'll use a mat. So that, like I said, is the Red Spectre, one of the early people that is influenced by Georges Méliès. Before I end, I'm going to show about 1 minute. This is a very long piece, so I'm only going to show about 30 seconds or a minute of it. But it's a piece by the Lumiere brothers. Because if you're going to experience the beginnings of film and take a trip to the moon, you should be in the audience in the 1890s in Paris, as if you were alive when the first people saw film for the first time ever in the history of mankind, moving image. So I'm going to give you a taste of what it must have been like to be in France in the 1890s, because I have the entire reel. And someday, like I said, I'll email you guys. I plan on showing the entire reel of what the Lumiere brothers showed a very, very select audience. They invited only theater producers and artists to the first showing. The second showing that you hear about was a public showing, but this one was the first showing that they did. And they showed this film, which the Lumiere brothers, I think one of the shots is basically his workers coming out of the factory. So everything then was a slice of life until Méliès turned it into magic, and the magic of theater was born from Méliès. But this is Lumiere doing slice of life type stuff, and I'll show you just about a minute or so of it. As soon as the principles of photography had been discovered by the Melies and Daguerre and Foxerat, efforts began to add movement to this wonderfully lifelike pictures. In 1882, Etienne Melies invented the director. In 1888, George Eastman developed flexible celluloid film, and that same year, Émile Renaud perfected a method of performing it. Renaud patented it as a praxinoscope, which I have, and began the illusion of movement to projected drawings. In America, Thomas Edison and his associates did it. After pioneers, Demy in France and in Germany and in the United States devised and exhibited improvements in motion photography during 1894 and 1895. But the acknowledged birth of film history is December 28th, 1895, when the first paying audience gathered in the Grand Café in France. Patented in 1895, and was a combination of camera, printer, and projector. So the first cameras they made was a combination of camera, printer, and projector. And that is the piece right there. And there's the inside of the machine that did this. It was called a cinematograph, and it was used as a camera. 25 meters of film was fed from a small wooden magazine on top after the exposure. So that gives you an idea of what the insides of these cameras look like. And no sprocket reels were necessary for such a short amount of film back then. The Lumieres originally were known as people that made photographic plates. So there are his workers coming out of the factory. This is basically the 5 o'clock whistle blow. And there's the famous little boy on his bicycle. So imagine you were alive in the 1890s and you were in this theater witnessing the very first showing of moving image on a theater screen. And some of you were asking, how did people react to this? You know, the iconic Thomas Edison, the great train robbery, where the guy has the gun pointing at the screen. That scared the hell out of people. People thought trains were going into them and they literally shot the movie screens. There are stories about movie theaters having bullet holes in their screens because people were so terrified. They thought they were being shot at by cowboys and Indians. They thought they were being run over by trains. They thought people actually were being killed. It was amazing things that happened. And in fact, that scene where the guy is pointing the gun at one point was censored because people thought that it actually condoned violence. Once in 1934, they started having the code, which was the code to see what was good and what was bad, what was allowed and what was not allowed. They were not allowing almost anything. It was practically puritanic, what was going on at a certain point in time, because people were being influenced by the theater. But that gives you, like I said, a taste of what it was like in that first showing in Paris. And like I said, I'll email you guys and let you know when we do the full reel. It is a large reel, and I just think that we should play it one time in a speakeasy from beginning to end, so you get the real feeling of being in that Paris cafe with Georges Méliès, watching moving image for the first time. And remember, they mentioned in the screen there that originally they had moving image using something like a flip book. And then they had the praxinoscope, which used mirrors, and the thing would turn and you'd look at the image in the mirrors. And then the item that you all know is this one, the zoetrope. So this is an original 1880s zoetrope. And believe it or not, you guys are going to be so impressed. This is a Milton Bradley version of it. So Milton Bradley, the game company, has been around since the 1800s. And so you would look through these slits and see an animation. And the animation is inside here. See that? So that inspired people to put it on plastic, celluloid, and project it using candles and eventually light, like the magic lantern and then the movie projectors. But it all begins with flip books. And the truth is, you think you're watching a moving image now. You're not. You're still watching a glorified flip book. You've never seen a moving image in your lives. YouTube, Zoom, high definition television, high definition theaters are still images flashed before your face. You're still watching a glorified flip book right now. I'm not moving. I'm a bunch of still images. If you'd have to be in my home to watch me move. And even then, your brain is watching a bunch of stills. It's taking images of me and realizing that it's a moving image once again. So you've never seen a moving image in your lives. All you're watching is stills and sound waves. So once again, thank you so much for coming by and for hanging out with me. You guys are amazing, amazing, amazing. I have enough films to last the entire weekend. So we'll do this again next time, hopefully live with Melissa and everyone. WatchCity is amazing, and all the stuff they do there is amazing. There's a bunch of more artists there, so check the schedule and check out some of the other artists because they're absolutely brilliant. And you know, I'm beyond honored to show you all this stuff. So thanks again, Alan and Frank and Rachel and Jen and Sandra and Jessica and Petty. There you are. Hey, I didn't see you until now. Good to see you. And Jeanette and there's Jessica again and Sandra and Melissa and Samsung cell phone and Jen and Rachel and Janine and Alan and Karen, the librarian, Rebecca. Hey, cool room. So and Mesner, and I love that room, Jeanette, also. So and wait, Andrea, I didn't forget you. So thank you very much, everyone. I will see you next time, or maybe even tomorrow for the speakeasy, the Silly Inventions speakeasy. Bye, everyone.